Hi, and welcome to Prepping Essentials.
Well, here we are down on the land, and it's another in the series of videos on lessons learned. And today I'm going to touch on something that I originally said would be the first one. But you know how it is, events overtake us, and it's turned out to be the second one, which is the Polytunnel. If you've been a regular viewer to the channel, you'll have seen this in numerous videos. It was probably the first project I started a long time ago now. I can't think, 2018. Yeah, and it's been a roller coaster ride ever since then, trying to get it set up and established to grow fruits and vegetables. So I'm going to sit myself down in the cabin with a cup of coffee. We'll talk about the saga that has been the Polytunnel. Well, the Polytunnel, there's so much you can say, but it's what's relevant, I guess, to anybody who hasn't done this before and is thinking about doing it, or maybe has just recently started doing it. The idea of the Polytunnel, for me anyway, is really to do two things. First is to get a head start on the season and try and get seeds germinated and established in small plants at the earliest point in the year. The idea behind that being that you can have succession cropping through the year, and instead of having to rely on long-term storage of the vegetables that you've grown in the polytunnel or in the garden, you're shortening that period where nothing's growing and nothing's producing food. The other reason, and you can maybe guess that from the type of things I've got in the polytunnel, is to try and grow stuff that doesn't work well outdoors in the climate that I'm in, which is the north of England. So two reasons for that, and I figured very early on when I actually got the land that I would want a polytunnel on. And given the time of year that I bought the land, which was the back end autumn coming into winter, it was one of the first things that I could do, and it was something that I felt I could construct through the winter without too much risk. The cabin, being wooden construction, was something that was going to take a long time, would be exposed to the elements during the construction, and I wanted to try and leave that until the weather improved. So the polytunnel was one of the first things that I did. In terms of selecting polytunnels, I had no idea really what I was looking for, although in the back of my mind, as with everything that I've done here, cost was a big factor. I didn't have a lot of money starting off. All of the money that I'd been saving really went into the purchase of the land, which was horrendously expensive, and it's maybe worth doing a lessons learned on that. I have done videos on the purchase of the land, but that is a long time ago now, and I've not really revisited that for anybody who might be starting out new and searching themselves for some land. So if you are, when you see this, rewind back to 2018, 2019, start of the year. I can't remember exactly when I did, but there's a couple of videos there on searching for land. I digress. We're supposed to be talking about polytunnels. So looking online on the internet and looking at what people had in different YouTube videos, the range was quite big. There are quite a few YouTube channels that are very professional and didn't seem to have the issue of finance when they installed their polytunnel, and they had either a very, very industrial kind of scaffold pole, if you're familiar with that term, tubes of metal for the framing, a good few inches in diameter rather than millimetres. And they ranged from that through various wooden constructions, additions to buildings like a lean-to kind of affair. But the majority seem to be these self-assembly, comes in a box, steel tubular frame covered in an actual fitted overcover which was already pre-made. You didn't have to fabricate it yourself out of sheets of polythene. So looking at those, that's what I decided to do. I decided to go with that style or method. Partly down to cost, I have to confess, because for the size that I have, which is 6 metres in length by 3 metres in width by 2 metres in height, I had to think about that for a second. We were still talking over £200, but it was within budget. I could afford to go out and buy one of those straight away rather than having to try and save up. And secondly, there was no assembly required really for the outer cover, the polythene exterior over the frame. It came in one piece. You simply, it wasn't simple, but it's simpler to just literally unroll that cover and just drop it over the frame and then tie it down. So I went for that. With hindsight, you'll have seen the videos that I've done previously on the Polytunnel, and particularly the construction and the prices that I had. You'll have seen that single-handed it could be done. It was within my grasp to do on my own. I didn't need to bring people in to help me to do it. So that's what we went for. We went for that style of polytunnel. Lessons learned from that style. It became quickly apparent as I went through the build process. I hadn't really given that much consideration to weather conditions in an open field like this. All of my previous history, limited though it is, has been around household gardens or maybe allotments in an urban area, rather than being very rural as this is in the middle of a field. I had thought about things like the wind and which direction the wind came from when I laid out the base for the polytunnel, and I thought I was doing the right thing by pointing the gable end towards the prevailing wind, so that I didn't have the broadest side of the polytunnel taking all of the wind. I had the smaller gable end side taking the force of the wind. In terms of base, I made a real schoolboy error. I assumed naively that having big heavy-duty railway sleepers to form the base of the polytunnel, that there was sufficient weight in those. It certainly felt like there was when I was carrying them across the field and moving them around into position. I assumed that the weight of that and the weight of the polytunnel structure fastened to those sleepers would be sufficient to anchor it in place. And again, if you've looked at my previous videos, you'll have seen that that wasn't the case, and you put the sleeper base onto what was at that point just a grass field. As that gets wet, it becomes quite slippery. There is a reduction in friction when it tries to move, and that combined with the force of the winds meant that although it was, once it was all tied together, a massively heavy structure, if I was to try and pick it up, it wasn't providing sufficient resistance from the wind when you combine that with a slippery grass surface, and as I showed in a previous video, the wind pushed against the structure and started it to actually move, and when the railway sleepers met some stronger resistance, it actually, two of them flipped over, and that just caused all kinds of mayhem, broken tubes for the framework and a disaster. I might pop some links into this video, or short video clips, so you can see if you've not been down that journey with me. So yeah, positioning and anchoring the structure to the ground was certainly a lesson to be learned, and I did learn that lesson. However, having said that, we pressed on and overcame and rebuilt the polytunnel, ready for the growing season. Next kind of lesson learned is inside the polytunnel. And I didn't really give this much thought. I was kind of preoccupied focusing my attention onto things like compost and seed trays and plant pots, and things that I was going to be growing inside the polytunnel. And I confess, I didn't really think too much about supporting plants that would actually be staying in the polytunnel for an extended period of time and would be growing in height. And here I'm kind of thinking about things like the tomato plants and the peas and the cucumbers. There's the odd squash plant in there as well. So things that need some kind of vertical support structure, or something to fasten onto as they spread out and gain in size. And I was quite late in the game actually before it occurred to me that I needed to do something like that, and you'll see in a previous video I ended up putting some support lats or battens along the sides of the polytunnel, and then fixed some vertical mesh panels, plastic mesh panels along there. So top tip, think about that from the start. Looking back, as I've done more research into different types of polytunnel, and thinking kind of ahead to the end of this year when I have a plan to replace the existing polytunnel, that does crop up in people's videos, and a little bit, not too much, but it does crop up here and there in some of the advertisements for the more industrial strength type polytunnels. They specifically mention lateral roof support beams and hanging brackets. Next on the agenda for lessons learned with the polytunnel, it has to be watering. Again, from the outset, I had in the back of my mind that I would establish some kind of a watering system, because as I've gone through the cabin build, you'll have seen me installing water pipes and water pumps and water tanks for the rainwater harvesting system. And again, I have to confess, I was a bit more focused on plants, and I kind of naively assumed that I had plenty of time to build up a watering system and to build up water supply on the field. And it was quite surprising just how much water you do actually need, particularly when the plants are young and the seedlings are starting to form. They do need regular watering to keep them growing. Miss out a day or two in warm weather, let alone some of the scorching weather we've had here in the UK this year, and the young seedlings are knocked dropped back, and you will definitely lose some. And then similarly, once the plants are matured, and if you are keeping them inside, such as the cucumbers and the peas and the tomatoes, as they grow and put out more foliage and more branches, they require quite a substantial amount of watering. You'll have seen in the previous videos I experimented quite a lot with the watering system. Initially I went for an off-the-shelf solution. When I looked at how you get the water through a network of piping to individual plants, clearly something that you use for the cabin water system, sort of 12mm or 15mm piping, is not practical. You need small scale piping, and it is very small scale, as I quickly found out. You're talking about 4mm diameter piping, and finding something that connects the pipework back to your traditional mains water supply, your kind of 15mm pipe, without buying a kit off the shelf is quite difficult. So I went for an off-the-shelf solution, self-watering. Now normally they're designed to run off your kind of outside garden tap where you plug your hose pipe into to water the garden. So everything is purpose built for that. The connection that leads into the timer is all based around that 15mm connection, and I was going to be using gravity feed. So again I had an issue of connecting plastic tanks to that gravity feed watering system. Anyway, as we progressed, I finally got it up and running, but I was finding that the gravity feed wasn't sufficient to push it down this 6 metre length of the polytunnel. And whilst I was getting a fairly good supply to the first couple of metres, maximum couple of metres, the far end of the system, at the end of the 3 metre run, just wasn't getting sufficient water. So then I started experimenting with other kinds of pumps. I have no shortage of pumps and pipe work. Again, I did have difficulty in connecting these varying sizes together. But again, a bit of a major schoolboy error. I kind of neglected basic physics, the siphon effect. If you've ever tried to siphon petrol out of a car petrol tank into a can, you know that you suck on it, it produces a flow of water. You quickly put the pipe below the level of the petrol tank in the car, and gravity will do the rest, and it'll continue feeding. I neglected that, and found that I was having a pump on timer, which was great, but once the timer switched off, the water continued to flow, and all I ended up doing was flooding the water out, emptying the tank, and then it didn't have water there the next day to water. The plants got dried out, and I ended up with lots of mini crises of plants drying out and getting scorched, and certainly getting knocked back. Peas in particular, a lot of those pea plants died off. Last but not least, and I found that very recently with my tomatoes, is the subject of ventilation. The temperatures in the polytunnel are just massively excessive if you aren't able to open the doors or some kind of vent to let out the hot air that's building up during the day. It literally does turn into a sauna inside the polytunnel, and you'll have heard me complain numerous times in previous videos about the temperatures when you open the door to the polytunnel in the morning. You would expect that overnight it's cooled down, but it has retained the heat, which I guess it's designed to do, and it's definitely caused problems with overheating the plants, and lots of condensation, which isn't good for the plants. There's also the secondary problem of pollination for the plants. As the tomatoes and cucumbers put out their flowers, they're expecting bees and insects to come along and transfer pollen from flower to flower to germinate the fruit. And again, as this was an enclosed polytunnel, there was no ventilation, and I was only coming down very, very small periods of time during the week, every second day or so, to quickly walk around on the way back from work. Again, the bees and other insects weren't getting the opportunity to get inside the polytunnel, do their thing with the flowers, and help create the fruit. So ventilation, definitely key, and something that I will be looking at as I examine all of the different possibilities for a replacement polytunnel later in the year. Just bear with me for a second while I pause the video because my neighbour's turned up. Sorry about that, that's the joys of doing a live video. You don't know what's going to crop up in the background as you're doing it. It was my neighbour. I could hear somebody moving around. I can see actually out the cabin door, and I wanted to just make sure it was him and not somebody that shouldn't be there. And I knew that he would see my door open and would start shouting to have a chat, which he did, and it turned into quite a lengthy chat about what we're getting up to on the land and the latest with the COVID crisis and so on and so forth. Big long conversation anyway. So now I'm going to try and get my head back into where I was. I was kind of towards the end actually. So overall, in terms of lessons learned with the polytunnel, there's probably 4 or 5 major issues. First one is think about the type of polytunnel you're going to have, and if it is going to be in a kind of exposed position as mine is in a field, it's got to be really robust structurally to take the weather conditions that you're going to get in the more exposed position, rather than tucked in the corner of a domestic garden somewhere sheltered by buildings all around it. While you're constructing, pay attention to keeping it on the ground, anchored onto a solid foundation, and kind of tied into the other lessons learned, think ahead a little bit about what you're going to grow in there and the needs that those plants will have, whether that's finding support for them to climb vertically or horizontally, something for them to hold on to and keep them off the ground. Water is definitely a major issue. Make sure you know how you're going to get a supply into the polytunnel. And in my case, what I also thought about, again with hindsight, because I work full time and my time to get down to water is quite limited, try and figure out how you can get water from your water tanks, not just in the polytunnel, but perhaps out from the polytunnel into the surrounding raised beds. All of my water supply for the polytunnel is contained within the polytunnel, and as I move and make progress with a different design, I'll still do the same thing, but I'll try and capture water from the polytunnel roof as I do with the cabin, and then use that to pipe out to the adjacent raised beds around the polytunnel. So structure and type of polytunnel, it's anchoring to the ground, what's going in there, type of plants and what their needs are. Water is key, but also think about ventilation so it doesn't overheat, as mine has done frequently, and also sufficient ventilation to allow the insects to go about the business and to help you to pollinate the plants and produce the fruit that it's going to produce. So off the back of all of those lessons that I've learned as I've set up the current polytunnel, I'll certainly bearing those in mind with the future structure that I'm going to put up. Haven't quite made my mind up yet. I have two real options. I can either remove the existing polytunnel, use that base foundation because it is massively sturdy now, it's well anchored into the ground, and build something either in tubular steel of a more robust diameter than the current one, or, and I'm kind of erring towards this solution, perhaps a wooden structure similar to the framing that I used for the cabin, something quite substantial, 3x2 inch framework, and then polycarbon sheets, or these corrugated sheets that I've got on the roof of the cabin. So that's the kind of structure that I'm thinking of, and whatever I do end up putting in, I will certainly take into account watering internally and externally, ventilation to reduce overstress of the plants with excessive temperature, and something that lets the bees and other insects in and out. So hopefully you'll find something in there that's useful, and help you not make the same mistakes that I've made with the polytunnel as I've gone through this year.
Don't know if you can see that from here, but it looks like I've got a bit of a mini crisis going on with the polytunnel. I have absolutely no idea how the wind has managed to do that, because those sleepers are bloody heavy, and yet somehow two of them have been lifted completely out. I really do not know how the hell that's happened. This side seems to be pretty much as I left it, but this side, I just don't get it at all. It's literally flipped the sleepers. That sleeper is completely been turned upside down. Well, this is truly bizarre. I just do not understand what's gone on here. This side seems to have moved about a foot from the weed membrane that was laid down. So that's moved a foot over. This side has just completely collapsed. The poles that support it, I can't even move them, they're a bit heavy, are just completely sheared. Completely sheared. Including that cross membrane there. Cross member there. It's just completely shattered. All the way along. Well, that's the cover off. I still truly don't understand how it's managed to do this, because that's a massive force to be able to somehow flip over these sleepers. I struggle to lift them, and there's three of them, and as you can see, the frame was screwed down. It's managed to flip the sleeper over, and on these anyway, rip out the brackets that I put on. But this is just completely trashed, completely. The tubes have just sheared off. I really don't understand how it's possible to do that, but it has. And the question now is, what can I do to recover it? I really don't know. Well, that's the main frame, or main part of the frame down. The big sleepers have got two of those 1.2 metre metal stakes, one in each end, so that's 6 in total. So all that remains now, I just need to get that sleeper and cut it down to fill these gaps. I'll stick a stake in each of them and probably tie across with some kind of metal bracket. Well, that's the sleepers cut down and put into the centres, and they've been staked down as well. So I'll just put one in the centre, in the centre gaps. I think it's enough to keep it in the ground. Those stakes are 1.2 metres and they're driven all the way in, so I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But just to keep the sleeper joint stable, I'll just put a couple of little overlap brackets on those. Well, that's the paving slabs down on the polytunnel. I've got a complete row down the middle. I'll put raised beds to either side of that, and then I've just got a little line across the front there. I'll probably gravel around the outside, but yeah, it's ready for putting the cover on. Let's see what happens with that, but it's not going to be today. Well, if I am going to be tackling this polytunnel today, one thing I do need to do is just put some wood preserver on these wooden battens, because I'll be using those to hold down the polytunnel cover, and it'll be a pig trying to paint those on the cover. So if I get them done now, hopefully they'll be able to dry out, and then they're pre-painted when it comes to fitting the cover. Well, despite the fact that I'm going to be trying this single-handed, I really do want to have a go and try and get the cover on the polytunnel. I know it's probably not the wisest of decisions, but the wind isn't strong today, touch wood, so I'm going to give it a go and see how I get on. Well, that was a bit of a chew, but it's rough fitted. I just need to go inside now, and there are some tie-offs and clips on the inside to fasten the outer cover to the frame. So if I go get those on, hopefully that'll at least keep it in position a little bit more securely than it is now. Typical, I guess. The wind is starting to pick up. Didn't want that at all today, but what to do? So I'm not going to waste any more time with filming on the outside. I'm going to go and get cracking inside and hopefully tie it down. Well, it's 10 o'clock already. It's taking a fair bit longer to do than I expected, but pretty much everything always does take longer than I expect, to be honest. You always crop up with some little thing that you didn't know would happen, but so far so good. We've got two of those battens on. Just need to trim one for this last piece because it's obviously not as long. So we'll get that knocked in and that'll be that side done. Then we've got the tricky bit of trying to tighten it up as we do the other side, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Well, that's the polytunnel covered and fastened down. How nice is that? I'm really pleased. It's been a bit of a struggle, but what to do? What I might do, well, I think we're 100% will do at some point, is put a proper door in this. Wow, you won't believe how warm this is in here. That's pretty amazing really, considering the wind's blowing and alright, there's a little bit of sun but not a great deal. So we've got that support in the back there. All the raised beds are in and can now start drying out. And I do want to make some kind of a bench here at the back, but at least now I can do that out of the rain and the weather, which is nice. Well, that's the bench in. I've got a nice top. I've got gaps so that the crap can be swept off. And I'm just looking now to see how I can get a couple of shelves in there. It's gone 1 o'clock already. Can't believe how quick the day's going. I know I say that pretty much every time lately, but it's true. The day just flies by. And I'll tell you what, working inside here, it's a bit warm, which is good because it means the plants can grow. But I'll finish sizing up for these shelves and see how we get on. Well, there we go. That's the little bench finished in the polytunnel. It's not looking too bad at all, to be fair. Just added little shelves underneath. I can start filling up now with all of my garden related stuff, get it out of the cabin and into here. Can't believe how warm it is in here, really warm, and it's actually quite a very cold day outside. So that's a good bit of progress done today. A little bit of a mini crisis now in terms of doing other stuff. My cordless drill has stopped working for some reason, so those bottom shelves aren't screwed in yet. Hopefully it just needs a charge, but that's going to slow my progress today, unfortunately. But I'm still very happy. Polytunnel is up, shelving is in. It is really nice to be able to see the tunnel up in the field. Nice bit of progress done. I am very happy with that. Well, I couldn't really end the video without a quick look at the polytunnel. I don't know if you can see, but the wind is whipping it up, which kind of just reinforces what I said earlier about structure. I'm just packing up for today. Everything's looking nice, had a nice water. I've even took a few little cuttings of cranberry and blueberry there just to see if they'll take. I'm not quite sure if you can propagate them like that or not, but I'm going to give it a go and just see. Everything else is fine. We have we have got the odd tomato here and there on the plant. We'll see over coming weeks how well that does. But that's it. I just thought I'd share that with you before I actually disappear. Lots of progression planting with seeds there. Hopefully these carrots and these cauliflowers will keep me going into the winter, but we are at the mercy of the weather, of course. So that's it. I hope that was of use for you, and we'll leave it there. Well, that's it for this video. I hope there was something in there that was of interest to you. If you did like the video, please do click on the like button. Also feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. As always, welcome any comments, questions or suggestions you might have. How's this coming across on these presentations? I'm not great in front of the camera, and it's useful to get a bit of feedback as to whether this style is something that you enjoy or you'd rather me just go back to the normal video. Do let me know in the comments section below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.